make sure that they obviously do their part and also meet the high-ranking Iranian officials that you see there. Mr. Mokhber is the one that I believe Shehbaz Sharif is speaking to, Prime Minister of Pakistan. You've had the Prime Minister of Armenia also come to Iran, speak. Many have spoken to Iran's leader also. And the interim coming to Iran, they found it the time for Iran's leader had found the time to speak to them. Again, all of them important in terms of the foreign policy of Iran. As I mentioned, the Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan earlier to have met with Iran's leader, including many others. Okay, Farah Hughes, journalist and author and activist, joins us from Dublin to give us his take on the developments here inside the Islamic Republic and beyond. Farah Hughes, welcome. We're looking at the shot here of this particular instance of what's transpiring here in the Islamic Republic, and that's the foreign dignitaries paying their homage and respects to the late Ibrahim Raisi and the foreign minister. The question to you is...
Yes, well, I think it's been a very important aspect of the Iranian government outreach to other governments within the region, with the détente with Saudi Arabia, and also the close connections with the Lebanese, the Yemenis, the Syrian and the Iraqi, not just governmental departments, but also the people that live in those the wider region of West Asia as law speakly, and also the wider political sphere, global sphere. I mean, the connections that were being made with China, India, and with Russia shows the strength and depth within the Iranian governmental structures and the personal contacts that have been built between President Raisi, the foreign minister, and all the dignitaries who I believe are there in as much a personal capacity today as they are representing their respective nations.
Farah Hughes, I think I lost your voice there. Did you finish your sentence?
Yes, I'm just saying it's most of the people who are there, I would imagine, are there in a personal capacity as much as they are representing their respective nations, because each of those dignitaries in attendance has personal memories, has a personal or had personal relationships with both the president and the foreign minister, and they're there in a personal aspect as well as a constitutional aspect for the people that they in turn represent.
Great. David Miller, the regional integration that was there when the late Ibrahim Raisi came into office was enhanced by the visits that he made, and is reflective on the fact that you have some of these regional countries in West Asia actually come and pay their respect. Do you think that, first of all, how do you think he managed to elevate that relationship between the Islamic Republic and the respective countries, and what impact does that have regionally? And if you could put that into perspective of what some of the goals are behind the Islamic Republic when it comes to things like wanting the U.S. forces out of the region, that they created and were a source of instability, for example. I think Iraq comes to mind when we talk about that, obviously. But can you maybe elaborate more on that along those lines, if you can?
Okay, so I mean, I think that as I was saying before, you know, the increased involvement in international agreements and organizations, Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the BRICS, and the increased south-to-south connections are, of course, part of the same thing. The way in which the geopolitics of the world has changed in the last 2 to 3 years is staggering, really. We forget, I think, how much it's changed in the last 2 years with the relationship between Russia, China and Iran especially becoming much closer than it has been before. And then, of course, the way in which the Chinese, for example, brokered the deal with the Saudis, which resulted, for example, in the Saudis' cessation of hostilities in Yemen, which of course itself allowed Ansarallah, effectively the government of Yemen, to enforce the boycott of Gaza and the Red Sea. So you have a whole series of different changes that have happened, and which are happening increasingly at an increasing pace. Now, of course, let's remember also that even the Saudis are now buying and selling oil in other currencies than the dollar, and that itself is a great mark of the decline of power of the US hegemon. The US is no longer so obviously hegemonic, and the role of Raisi and the Islamic Republic in that is really very significant. It's not an insignificant thing, and that the way in which that's worked, people I think haven't, outside West Asia perhaps, or outside the global south, haven't quite appreciated that the rules have changed, the way in which things work have changed, and of course all of that is in part at least due to the efforts of the Islamic Republic and indeed of President Raisi. So we have a quite changed landscape, and that of course was what was behind and allowed the context of the, for example, if you talk about Iraq, the axis of resistance is an actual living, breathing organism. These are a whole series of different armed groups, something like 23 in the Islamic resistance in Iraq, which are not proxies of Iran, of course, but which are independent organizations, but which collaborate together. And that collaboration has really tied down the Zionist entity and really made it very, very difficult for the entity to carry out the genocide in the way in which it would want to do so. So that's really also part of the legacy. Let's not forget to mention, of course, which we shouldn't, Hezbollah in the north, and the fact that there are now refugee camps for Israeli Jews inside occupied Palestine because they cannot go back to their houses in the settlements in the north of the colonies. So that all of this is part of a much bigger web changes that are coming around with multipolarity, which, as everyone knows who has looked at this, President Raisi was very important in bringing about.
Yeah, well, you were talking, I was taking a look at those dignitaries. It's worth mentioning that before I come to you, Frahis. Some of the countries and their representatives, like Qatar, Turkmenistan, Tunisia, Tajikistan, you're looking at presidents, prime ministers, including Iraq, Pakistan, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Russia, down the list that I'm looking at over here, and Lebanon. Many of the regional countries, and many of the countries that Iran has been able to establish relationships to the point where we are looking at the, how can I say, perhaps you can help me out here, Frahis. You know, you have the old order and then you have the new order. The late Ibrahim Raisi came in while the basis for the new order was set, and he was able to advance that agenda, which covered a variety of interests, some of which some countries were maybe not unsure of because they were tied to the West, for example, but slowly they are realizing that the old status quo no longer is advantageous to them. I'm speaking very generally. Do you think that that's one way of looking at it? If you can maybe fill that in for us, if you agree with that.
I think you're absolutely correct in the analysis of what you've just put forward. I think history will show that that these times that we're living in are pivotal. There are pivotal times, and they are the times that when we look back, we will see the figures that have had such a huge impact upon basically what is becoming de facto a multi-polar geopolitical global world to live in, a world which will be brought about through diplomacy. I think the main strength of the foreign minister and the president was their diplomacy. And what we're witnessing is the fruits of that diplomacy. What we're witnessing is a victory for diplomacy. They had a vision. That vision was internal. That vision was to support and sustain the 1979 revolution, which is to the benefit of all the people in Iran. It is there the revolutionary organizations are there to protect that vision of an independent, sovereign, standalone state that had its own foreign policies and wasn't controlled by outside military forces, wasn't controlled internally by outside financial companies that would be there to steal the resources of the Iranian people. So if they encapsulated a vision of peace and security, stability and economic growth and wealth for the nation spent within the nation, I think if you then extrapolate that vision was to have peace and stability, regional cooperation for the benefit of all. And then if you take that outside of West Asia and you go to Russia, China, Venezuela, South America, and encourage anyone within that world fraternity of governments to say, here is how we can live in peace, security and prosperity. Let us all work together. So the Iranian government and the president and the foreign minister and indeed the guys in the military, they are not promoting the way America and the West promotes their values onto other sovereign nations throughout the world, and indeed impose military and financial structures upon what we could call financially or militarily colonized countries that buy weapons from America, such as Saudi Arabia, such as the UAE, such as India. But what the Iranian constitution in itself put forward and expressed by its public and diplomatic representatives is, here is a vision of how life could be if we all work in cooperation. This is something that will be to the benefit of all, and it is a moral case for people to come on board. And I think what we're witnessing is, as the old world of imperialism and colonialism begins to fade, we are seeing this vision being put on the diplomatic table and people coming forward and saying, this is what we would like to. And I believe that that is why Iran and their foreign policy has resounded so strongly with people within the region and with people like myself halfway around the world in Europe. I see that vision as a world that I would like to see children and grandchildren grow up in. And as such, I think what we're witnessing with the dignitaries there today is an outpouring of countries and governments and societies and people who actually buy into the same global justice, the same fight against oppression, and the same liberation for those people who are colonized, living under military occupation, and countries that are financially occupied by the International Monetary Fund, by the World Bank, and by Western capitalist corporations. So we are seeing a convergence of like-minded people with a like-minded vision who want to see a safe and secure world for all, and I believe that's a vision that Iran is increasingly playing a greater part in showing what is possible.
Indeed, thank you so much for that. That was great, Fra Hughes. We do appreciate it. Fra Hughes, journalist, author, and activist. Prior to him, we had David Miller, academic broadcaster, investigative researcher. Fra Hughes is from Dublin, and by accident, we also have somebody from Ireland here in the studios with us. Tig Hickey, welcome.
Thank you so much, sir.
Political activist and comedian. Unfortunately, you are here at a time where the nation is mourning.
Yes.
And this is part of history, and maybe at the same time it's a blessing in disguise to have your viewpoint as to what you've witnessed, I guess, outlook that you have had before arriving in the Islamic Republic, and now what you think of it. And of course, if you became in one shape or another familiar with the late President Ibrahim Raisi, what you saw in him, and basically what you've observed since you've come here in this regard.
Well, to my shame, I didn't know a great deal about the President. I wasn't overly aware of domestic politics in Iran. I just knew his connection to Palestine, to be honest, and that he was an important part of the Palestinian resistance and a key component in that. I would be a keen supporter of Palestine myself, so that would be the prism through which I knew him. But my overall impression of Iran, coming from a Western country and feeling that Iran is in some way kind of evil and that the people are potentially monstrous. We've got a very Manichaean way of looking at things in the West. You know, there's the goodies and the baddies, and I think if there's any good thing that has come out of the last 7+ months in the horrors that have happened in Gaza, it's that the Western propaganda, I think, is being blown open. Social media is playing a really important role in that, where people are not swallowing the mainstream media perspective on the world, not just on Gaza, not just on Palestinians, and I think Iran is a big part of that. So whilst I feel I'm reasonably well read and I'm an anti-imperialist in my politics and my comedy, I was still quite surprised at just how generous and kind and open the Iranians are. They're also a bit crazy. I find them a bit crazy and a bit chaotic, and that reminds me of home, because Irish are quite like that as well. But I have to say today, I found it remarkable that I was in the streets with, I would assume, millions of people. I never felt unsafe. I never felt harangued. Nobody said a bad word to me. And we were talking amongst ourselves, some of the other guests who've come over, and we were wondering, is there any Western country where you could say that? I love Ireland. I'm a proud Irishman, but I'm not sure a gathering of that size would be so welcoming to somebody from a different ethnicity or culture in Ireland. I'm sad to say that, but in Iran I felt so comfortable and so welcomed, and the people, they get history, they get politics, they know the way the world works, and I'm really enjoying meeting the people, I have to say.
Okay, we are going to take a quick pause here. There's a lot happening today.
Of course.
But we're going to continue the conversation, but we're going to go back to the live ceremony that's taking place based on what we're seeing right now. With interpretation, instead of me talking, let's take a listen.
نمایندگان محترم حزب وطن مجلس ترکیه برای ادای احترام
Distinguished representatives of Vatan Party of the Turkish Parliament,
رئیسی و شهدای همراه ایشان وارد می‌شوند.
they are entering to pay respect to the late President Raisi.
رئیس جمهور محترم کشور تونس
The President of Tunisia and the accompanying delegation enter the hall to pay respect to the late President Raisi and his companions.